I have begun this letter 3 times already, and each time the words have felt insufficient or false. But tonight the house is very quiet, quieter than it has been in months, I think, though perhaps it has always been this quiet and I am only now noticing, and I find I cannot sleep without trying once more to set down what I need you to understand. Not because I expect you to do anything. What could you do, so far away in Hampstead? But because I must tell someone who knew me when I was still whole, when the shape of my days made sense. You asked in your last letter, the one that arrived, when was it? Some weeks ago, perhaps in October, though it might have been early November, whether I had given thought to joining you in London. You wrote carefully, as one might speak to an invalid, suggesting that Hermann could help with the necessary papers, that there are positions for men with my training at the technical colleges, that the boys, Stefan and little Michael, who must be nearly 10 now, or is he older, would benefit from knowing their uncle. You mentioned the garden behind your house, the one with the apple trees you wrote about some time ago, as though the thought of it might tempt me. I read your words many times. I know what you were not saying. I know what you fear. I want to answer you plainly, but I find I cannot even locate the beginning of an honest answer. When did this begin? Was it when the new government formed? That was winter, I think, or early in the year. I remember standing in Mother's parlor listening to the radio, and you were here, weren't you? You said something about leaving, I think. Or was it earlier that summer when we saw them marching down Königsallee, and you gripped my arm? I cannot remember now which came first, or has it always been there beneath the surface, waiting, something I was too comfortable or too foolish to see? I do not know any more. I know only that I wake each morning in a familiar room, in a familiar city, and yet I am living in a country I no longer recognize, and the man I see in the mirror has become something I was not raised to be. Let me try to explain, though I am not sure I can explain even to myself. You remember how I used to describe my work to you, how I loved the particular silence of a classroom when a difficult proof resolved itself in a student's mind, that sudden clarity passing across young faces like light breaking. I taught for many years at the Schiller Gymnasium on Blücherstrasse, 17 years, I think, or perhaps it was 16, I should know this exactly, but somehow I don't, in the old building with the limestone facade and the iron gates that Mother used to walk past. The building smells of old wood and chalk dust, and that floor wax that Herr Becker orders from somewhere, Essen perhaps, and in autumn the chestnut trees outside my classroom windows turn such a gold that sometimes, during examinations, I would look up and feel overcome with a gratitude I could not name. I am no longer permitted to teach there. The letter came in spring. April, I think, though it might have been late March. A Friday, because I remember I had been planning to meet Ernst Mannheim that evening at the café on Kasernenstrasse, the one where we had been meeting on Fridays for years, 8 years, 10. It was very official, the letter, typed on government stationery with an eagle embossed at the top, and it referenced some law whose number I did not recognize, and informed me that my services were no longer required. There was a phrase, I remember, something about restoring the civil service, though I cannot recall it exactly now. The words blurred together, as though my removal were merely administrative, as though I had not given the best hours of my life to those students standing at that blackboard 6 days a week, returning home each evening with chalk dust under my fingernails. I read the letter several times, standing in the entrance hall of this apartment, still holding my satchel. I had just returned from school. It was raining lightly, I remember that, and my coat was damp. I stood there and I thought, there has been a mistake. There must have been a mistake. I am a veteran. My father died at Verdun. I have taught for how many years was it? Surely someone will realize. The director called me to his office some days later. Monday, perhaps. I walked the familiar route from the tram stop, the number 7 line, which I had taken every morning for all those years, and climbed the stone stairs to wherever his office was, 3rd floor, I think, and knocked on the door. When he called me in, he did not meet my eyes. He stood by the window overlooking the courtyard where the boys played football, and he spoke of budgets and regulations and difficult times. He said the ministry had been very clear, or something like that. He said his hands were tied. Then he turned and offered me his hand, and when I took it, God help me, Ruth, I took it, because what else was I to do? His palm was damp, and he released my fingers almost immediately, as if my touch might contaminate him. He was wearing something on his lapel, the small pin they all wear now. I had noticed it appearing on various lapels over the preceding months, but his was new. I taught until the end of the summer term. Those last months had a strange, dreamlike quality, as though I were watching myself from a distance. I would stand at the blackboard. I think it was room 307, my room, where I had taught since. When was it? After the war, certainly, demonstrating geometric proofs or explaining whatever we were studying, and the chalk would leave its familiar white dust on my fingers, and the sunlight would fall across the desks, just as it always had, and I would think, surely this is real. Surely this will continue. Mathematics does not change. A theorem proved is proved forever. But then I would catch sight of young Klaus in the 3rd row. You remember Klaus, Ruth, the carpenter's son with the gift for algebra, the one I thought might study at Göttingen. And he would be wearing his uniform, and his eyes would slide past me as though I were already gone. Some of the boys stopped answering when I called on them. Not dramatically, not with hostility exactly, but with a kind of studied absence. They would look down at their desks and say nothing, and after a moment I would move on, and we would all pretend this was normal. One boy, Werner something, his father owned a printing business, I think, stopped raising his hand entirely. It was March when that started, or perhaps February. He had been my best student that year, quick and intuitive. But after some point he sat silent, his hands folded on his desk. The French teacher next door stopped speaking to me as well, around the same time. We had shared coffee for years, sitting at the small table by the window overlooking the courtyard, discussing our students and our lessons. She once brought me a book of Verlaine's poems for my birthday. 38th, I think. You were here for dinner that evening, and you laughed at my accent when I tried to read one aloud. She had written something in the front, something kind. I have that book still, but after some point she gave me nothing, and when I wished her good morning in the staff room, she would nod very slightly and turn away. The last time I tried to speak with her, it was May, perhaps, or June, before the term ended. She actually left the room, simply gathered her things and walked out, leaving her coffee half finished. I sat there alone, looking at the cup with the stain of her lipstick on the rim, and I felt such a wave of humiliation that my hands began to shake. I do not think she is a cruel woman, Ruth. I think she is afraid. I think we are all afraid, though the nature of the fear differs. The last day of term, whenever that was, late July, I suppose, I cleaned out my desk. The school was mostly empty by then, the students gone home for summer. I had accumulated so much over the years, old examinations, sketches drawn by students, a slide rule my first class gave me as a gift. That was years ago, early in my time there. Letters from former pupils, a photograph of mother, a coffee cup with a chip in the rim, a box of chalk I preferred to what the school provided. I packed these things into boxes that Herr Becker brought me, and I worked slowly, trying not to think. Herr Becker came back when I was nearly finished, and he helped me carry the boxes down the stairs and out to the street. It was hot that day, very bright, and the chestnut trees were in full leaf. We stood on the pavement near the tram stop, and his hands shook. He is old, 70, perhaps older, and his eyes were wet. he said. "It is a great wrong, Herr Kirchner." Just that. Then he turned and walked back into the building, and I stood there in the sunshine, holding my boxes, watching children from somewhere pouring out with their satchels and their laughter, and I felt such grief that I thought I might be sick. I did not go back. They have my books still, my personal library that I kept in the classroom, my Klein, the Euclid with my notes in the margins, the volumes of Euler. I imagine someone has removed them by now, or perhaps they sit there gathering dust. I think about them sometimes, my books in that empty classroom. I wonder who sits at my desk now, if anyone does. They must have found someone by September. Mathematics must still be taught. For a time I tried to tell myself this was temporary. Governments change, policies shift. I am a German, after all, born in Dusseldorf in, when was it? 1895, I think. Educated here, a man who served in the war and was wounded and decorated for something or other. Surely that must count for something. I thought perhaps someone would realize the mistake. I thought reason would prevail. Do you know how many times I have thought that phrase, Ruth? Reason will prevail, as though reason were inevitable. But I am beginning to understand that reason is not a law. It is only a habit, and habits can be broken. I have been trying to find other work. There are tutoring opportunities sometimes, though fewer now. I placed an advertisement in the newspaper, September, I think, offering instruction in mathematics and physics. I received a few responses, not many. Two of them wanted to know, they did not say it directly, but the meaning was clear, whether I was of the right sort. They asked for documentation of my ancestry. I did not reply to those letters. I burned them, actually, which was perhaps melodramatic, but I could not bear to keep them. The third response was from a widow whose son needed help preparing for examinations. She lived near the Rhine Park, in one of the old buildings. I went there in September, or perhaps it was October, and met the boy. He was 17, serious, methodical. We got on well. He reminded me a little of Klaus, actually. I taught him twice a week in the evenings. The widow would serve us tea before we began, and then retire while we worked at the kitchen table. The apartment smelled of furniture polish and the linden trees outside. I would walk there from my flat, 20 minutes or so, and we would work through calculus problems, and for those hours I would feel almost like myself again. This continued for some weeks. Then one evening, it was November, I think, not long after the troubles in Berlin that we read about, I arrived at the usual time, and she met me on the landing before I could knock. She did not invite me in. She stood in the doorway and said, her voice was strained, that the neighbors had begun to talk, that it would be best if we discontinued the lessons. I stood there, stupidly, still holding my satchel, and I said something, I don't remember what. She said the boy had made excellent progress, that she was grateful. Then she handed me an envelope with payment, though I had not asked for it in advance. Her hand trembled. She thanked me again. Then she closed the door very gently, and I walked back down the stairs and out into the street, where boys in uniform were marching past, singing something. I did not open the envelope until I got home. She had included extra money, as though to ease her conscience. It sits in my desk drawer still. I do not want it, but I cannot afford to throw it away. I am living on my savings now. They will not last forever. I have been careful, I have always been careful, but there are limits. I have perhaps a year if I am frugal, perhaps longer if I sell some of Mother's furniture, the cabinet in the hallway, or the dining table we used to sit at when you came for Sunday dinners. Do you remember those Sundays, Ruth? You would take the train from Krefeld, and we would walk to the market in the morning, and then come back and I would cook. Badly, you always said, and we would talk for hours. I cannot imagine selling that table, but I may have to. Money is not truly what frightens me, though. The deepest fear is harder to name. It has to do with the way the city has changed, or perhaps the way I perceive it has changed. There are signs now. You have perhaps heard of this. Little painted notices in shop windows. The first time I saw one, it was some weeks ago, October, I think, outside the bakery on Oststrasse, where I had bought bread for years and years, since after the war. The bakery where old Herr Stolz still rises early to bake the rye bread with caraway that mother loved. I had walked there thousands of times, Ruth, and the sign was new, painted on a small board and hung in the window. I stood on the pavement staring at it. Herr Stolz saw me through the window. I am sure of it. We looked at each other for a moment, and I thought perhaps he would come out. Perhaps he would explain. But he simply looked at me and then looked away and turned back to his customer. I no longer go to that bakery. I walk much farther now to buy bread from a different shop, near the Verhan station somewhere, one that does not yet have a sign. The baker there is younger, I do not know him well, but he sells me bread without comment. The walking is not onerous. I have always enjoyed walking, but the fact of it sits in me like a stone. I am choosing my routes now, calculating where I may go and where I must avoid. The park where I used to sit and read is closed to me now. There are benches marked with paint, yellow, very bright, and a sign at the entrance that is very clear. I saw a man removed from one of the benches not long ago on a cold afternoon. He was an old man sitting with a book. Two policemen simply walked up and led him away, while a few others watched or did not watch. I was standing some distance away. The old man did not resist. He simply stood up, carefully, closing his book, and walked between them out of the park. I do not know what happened to him. By the time I walked past the bench, it was as though he had never been there. I spend my evenings at home now. I have been working through Hilbert again, taking notes, trying to hold on to mathematical thought. There is comfort in axioms, Ruth. If one assumes certain properties, then certain other properties must follow, inevitably, regardless of who observes them. A proof does not care about blood or ancestry. Sometimes I think this is why I have always loved mathematics. It is a country without borders. A theorem proved in Göttingen is true in Paris, in Cambridge, in Jerusalem. No one can revoke your citizenship from the realm of numbers, except, of course, they can forbid you from teaching it, from speaking of it in certain rooms, from sharing it with the young. I am ashamed, Ruth, of how much I miss the classroom. I lie awake at night, and I do lie awake most nights now, and I think of lessons I will never teach. I think of young Klaus, who might have become a mathematician, and I wonder what he is being taught instead. I think of the simplicity of standing at a blackboard, the weight of chalk in my hand. These thoughts feel grotesque to me now, like mourning a favorite pen when the house is burning, and yet I cannot stop them. There are rumors, always rumors. People speak in lowered voices about what is happening in other cities, about businesses seized, homes marked, people vanished. I do not know what to believe. Some of it must be exaggeration. We are not living in the Middle Ages. This is the 20th century, an age of science and law and constitutions. And yet I have seen enough to know that something fundamental has shifted, and I no longer trust my own sense of what is possible. Do you remember, Ruth, when we were children, how Father used to say that Germany was a nation of poets and thinkers? He said it with such pride. He believed it absolutely, and I believed it too for most of my life. I believed that culture was a kind of armor. Now I think perhaps it is only a thin veneer, and when it cracks, what lies beneath is no different here than anywhere else. I ran into Ernst Mannheim some weeks ago. Do you remember Ernst? We studied together. He read law while I read mathematics, and we came back to Düsseldorf after the war. He went on to practice law very successfully. We had been meeting for coffee every Friday for years at the cafe on Kasernenstrasse until spring when everything changed. After that, he stopped coming. I went to the cafe twice, waited, and he never appeared. I did not go back. But some weeks ago, I saw him on Königsallee, near, I forget exactly where. It was afternoon, cold and gray, and I was walking home from the library. He was coming toward me, wearing his good coat, carrying his briefcase. I recognized him from a distance. You know how one recognizes a friend. My heart actually lifted. I thought, ah, here is Ernst. I can speak with Ernst. I raised my hand to wave. I called his name. He looked at me. Our eyes met. And Ruth, his face went pale, actually pale, and he turned and crossed to the other side of the street, quickly, almost stumbling, and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, frozen, my arms still raised, watching him disappear. People flowed around me. A tram rattled past, and I felt such a mixture of hurt and understanding that I could not untangle them. What is he afraid of? That my presence will contaminate him? That being seen with me will invite questions? Perhaps he is right to be afraid. Perhaps I am the one being foolish, clinging to old ideas of friendship as though they still mean something, as though the years we spent together at university, drinking beer in the taverns, arguing about philosophy and whether mathematics was discovered or invented, as though all of that could not simply evaporate. I have thought about that moment many times since. I have imagined confronting him, writing him a letter. But I know what he would say. He would say he has a family to protect. He would say times are difficult. He would say his hands are tied. Everyone's hands are tied, Ruth. Everyone is sorry. And somehow, collectively, all these tied hands are creating something monstrous. Elsa has been my one constant. My neighbor across the hall. You met her once, I think, years ago. She is nearly 70, widowed, childless. She brings me soup sometimes, or cake she has baked, and we sit in her parlor and play chess and do not speak of what is happening outside. She is not of my background, but she seems not to care, or chooses kindness anyway. I do not ask. I am simply grateful. Her apartment is full of photographs, Ruth in silver frames on every surface, her wedding, her husband in uniform, her parents, her brothers who died in the influenza after the war. Sometimes I look at those photographs while we play chess, and I think about how much grief this one woman has absorbed, and yet she still bakes cakes and feeds stray cats and brings soup to her neighbor. Not long ago, Thursday, I think, though I am not certain, she told me about her nephew who is involved in something. She did not say exactly what, only that he is very committed and has some position of authority. She said he has been asking questions about the neighbors, about who lives in the building. She said this very quietly, leaning across the chessboard, barely above a whisper. Then she poured more tea and changed the subject to the weather. I understand what she was telling me. I understand that even Elsa may not be able to protect me if her nephew decides to inquire. I understand that I am becoming a danger to her simply by living across the hall, by existing. At night I find myself thinking about my father. He died at Verdun, May of 1916, I think, or was it June? But I remember him vividly still. His hands, always ink-stained from his work at the municipal offices, his careful way of speaking, his love of Goethe and Schiller, the way he would recite passages while he shaved in the mornings. He believed in duty, in honor, in service to the fatherland. He believed Germany was the most cultured nation on earth. He went to war without complaint, kissed mother and me goodbye at the railway station, and wrote letters home every week about the camaraderie of the trenches, the nobility of sacrifice. He died some weeks after his last letter arrived. We received notification from his commanding officer, a very formal letter praising his courage. His body was never recovered. There is a memorial somewhere, the Nordfriedhof, I think, with his name on it, along with hundreds of others. Mother used to visit every year on the anniversary, bringing flowers. What would he think of this, Ruth? What would he tell me to do? I used to believe I knew. I used to think that being German meant something clear and definite. Orderliness, learning, respect for culture and law. I thought I belonged to that tradition as surely as anyone, that my place in it was secure, that the accident of my birth into a Jewish family was merely biographical, like being born in spring or having brown eyes. But now I am told that I do not belong, that I have never belonged, that there is something in my blood that makes me foreign, dangerous. And the terrible thing, Ruth, the thing I am most ashamed to admit, is that some part of me wants to argue with them, wants to prove that I am as German as any of them. I want to show them my father's memorial, my own discharge papers, the years I spent teaching their children, the books I have read, Goethe and Schiller and the others, the language I speak without accent. I want to lay it all out like evidence and say, look, you have made a mistake. I am one of you. But that is not how this works, is it? They do not care about evidence. They have decided what I am, and no proof will change their minds, because the decision was never based on proof. And I, who have spent my life believing in reason and evidence, I am helpless before it. This is what I cannot make you understand from so far away, what I am not sure I understand myself. It is not that people have become monsters. Most of them are ordinary, tired, worried about their own families. The widow who dismissed me is not a monster. Herr Becker wept when he helped me. Even the French teacher who cannot bear to speak to me, I do not think she is a monster. She is afraid. They are all afraid. But something has been unleashed, some permission to stop seeing, to stop caring. And once that permission is granted, everything else follows with a terrible logic, the way a proof follows from its axioms. If one accepts that some people are fundamentally other, then it becomes possible to exclude them from the park, from the school, from the bakery. And if they can be excluded from these places, why not from the professions? And if from the professions, why not from citizenship? And if from citizenship, why not from... But I cannot finish that thought. I cannot let my mind go there. Surely there are limits. Surely we have not fallen so far. You asked whether I have thought about leaving. Yes, Ruth, I have thought about it. I lie awake and imagine packing a suitcase, buying a ticket, boarding a train to France or Belgium. I imagine the train pulling away from Düsseldorf, the city disappearing behind me. I imagine crossing the border, showing my passport, arriving in some foreign city where I know no one, where I would have to begin again from nothing. And then I imagine walking through this city, my city where I was born, where every street corner holds a memory, and I imagine saying goodbye to it, perhaps forever. I imagine admitting that I cannot stay, that I am not safe here, that everything I believed about belonging was fiction. And Ruth, I find I cannot do it. Not yet. Not while there is still a chance that this madness will pass, that reason will return. Perhaps this makes me a fool. Perhaps you are reading this and thinking I do not understand the danger. You may be right. I do not trust my own judgment anymore. I used to think of myself as a rational man. Now I feel like I am groping in the dark, unable to see more than a few steps ahead. I think of you often, Ruth, in your home in London, safe with Herman and the boys. I am glad you left when you did. I do not resent it. You saw more clearly than I did, and you had the courage to act. But I cannot follow you. Not yet. Perhaps soon, if circumstances worsen. But for now I am still here, in this apartment where Mother used to live, where I have spent so many years. I wake each morning and make coffee and read the newspaper, though I trust less and less of what it says. I work on my mathematics and I walk through the city. carefully. I wait for your letters, which arrive less frequently now. I do not know if you are writing less or if something is happening to them. I try to imagine a future, though the shape of it is increasingly difficult to see. There is a tram I used to take each morning, the number 7. I still see it sometimes, passing through the intersection near my building. I watch it, and I think of all those mornings, the certainty that I would board the tram and ride to school and spend my day teaching. That certainty seems almost absurd now, like something from a dream. What I am trying to tell you, Ruth, what I have been circling around this entire letter, is that I do not know what to do. I do not know whether to stay or to leave, whether to hope or to despair, whether to believe this is temporary or the beginning of something far worse. I am a man trained to think clearly, and I find I cannot think clearly about this. My mind skitters away from the implications or races toward them too quickly, conjuring horrors that perhaps will never come. I wanted you to know that I am still here, that I am afraid but not yet broken, that I miss you and think of you and am grateful for your letters, even when they ask questions I cannot answer. Do not worry too much. I am being careful. I am taking precautions. I have some money saved and I have my health, and I am not yet old. If I need to leave, I will leave, but not yet. Not while I can still walk these streets, not while I can still open my books and work through proofs, not while there is still some small dignity in continuing. Write to me when you can. Tell me about the boys, about your work, about ordinary things. I need to remember that ordinary life is still possible somewhere. With all my love, Jakob.